I stood in my driveway staring at the certified letter in my hands, feeling my blood pressure spike with every word I read. The Pleasant Grove Homeowners Association was threatening to foreclose on my house over a $50 fine I had supposedly never paid. I lived in a modest 3-bedroom ranch in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I had moved here 3 years ago thinking this would be my forever home. Now some power-hungry HOA board was claiming I owed them money for leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection day. The thing is, I had paid that fine the same week I received it, back in March. I had the bank statement to prove it. My name is Vincent Drake, and I am a software engineer who works from home. I keep to myself, maintain my property, and follow the rules. I painted my house the approved beige color from the HOA palette. I kept my lawn at exactly 2.5 inches like the covenant required. I even replaced my mailbox with the standard model everyone else had. But apparently, none of that mattered to Patricia Whitmore, the HOA president who had it out for me since day one. Patricia lived in the biggest house in the neighborhood, a sprawling 5-bedroom Mediterranean-style mansion at the end of Sagaro Lane. She was in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair that never moved, even in the Arizona wind. She wore pearl necklaces to HOA meetings like she was attending a country club luncheon instead of a neighborhood gathering in a community center. Every interaction I had with her dripped with condescension, as if my presence in Pleasant Grove personally offended her. The letter stated that I had 14 days to pay the original $50 fine, plus $600 in late fees and legal costs, or they would begin foreclosure proceedings. $650 total for leaving my trash cans out too long. I read it 3 times, each time getting angrier. This was insane. This was predatory. This was exactly the kind of HOA horror story I had heard about but never thought would happen to me. I immediately went inside and pulled up my banking records on my laptop. There it was, clear as day. March 15th, a payment of $50 to Pleasant Grove HOA with the memo "trash can violation." I printed out the statement and grabbed my phone. The HOA management company was called Desert Property Solutions, and I dialed their number with shaking hands. A bored-sounding woman answered. "Desert Property Solutions, this is Michelle speaking." "Hi, Michelle, my name is Vincent Drake. I am calling about a letter I received today threatening foreclosure over an unpaid fine that I actually did pay. Account number or address: 42 Cactus Drive, Pleasant Grove," I heard typing. "Okay, I see your account. You have an outstanding balance of $650. No, I don't. I paid the original $50 fine in March. I have the bank statement right here showing the payment went through." More typing. "I do not see any record of that payment in our system." "Then your system is wrong. The money left my account. It was cashed. Someone received it." "Sir, if it is not in our system, then we did not receive it. You need to pay the outstanding balance by the 17th of this month or the foreclosure process will begin." "Can I speak to a supervisor?" "Our supervisor is not available right now. You can email copies of your bank statement to accounts@desertpropertysolutions.com and someone will review it within 7 to 10 business days. The letter says I only have 14 days total. 7 to 10 business days does not give me enough time to resolve this before you start foreclosure." "That is our policy, sir. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I hung up, resisting the urge to throw my phone across the room. This was deliberate. They were setting me up to fail. I immediately scanned my bank statement and emailed it to the address Michelle had given me. Then I started researching attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes. Most of the lawyers I found online had mixed reviews or charged consultation fees. I was not thrilled about spending. Then I came across a website for Marcus Goldstein, an attorney in Phoenix who offered free initial consultations and had a track record of winning cases against abusive HOAs. His website showed several case results where he had gotten clients tens of thousands in damages. One case even resulted in the entire HOA board being removed. I called his office immediately. A paralegal named Sarah answered, and after I explained my situation, she scheduled me for a consultation the next morning. I barely slept that night, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Could they really take my house? I had equity built up. I had never missed a mortgage payment. How was this legal? Marcus Goldstein's office was in a modern building in downtown Phoenix. He was a man in his early 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything. We sat in his conference room and I laid out the entire situation, showing him the letter, my bank statement, and the timeline of events. He listened carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Vincent, I am going to be straight with you. What they are doing is legal in the technical sense, but it is also potentially actionable if we can prove they are doing it in bad faith. Arizona HOA law gives associations significant power to collect on debts, including foreclosure. However, they are required to follow specific procedures and they cannot act in a manner that is oppressive or fraudulent. I paid the fine. I have proof. I believe you. The question is, why is their system showing you did not pay? There are a few possibilities. 1. It was a genuine clerical error. 2. Someone pocketed the money. 3. They are deliberately targeting you. Have you had other issues with this HOA? I thought about it. Patricia Whitmore, the president, has always been cold to me. When I first moved in, I introduced myself at a board meeting and she barely acknowledged me. I got written up for my grass being a quarter-inch too long once, even though I had just mowed it that morning. She drives by my house regularly, like she is looking for violations. Marcus nodded. That fits a pattern I have seen before. Some HOA board members abuse their power to harass homeowners they do not like. It becomes personal. Do you know anything about Patricia's background or why she might have it out for you? Not really. I keep to myself. I work from home, so I am around a lot, but I do not bother anyone. Let me ask you something. Does Patricia or anyone on the board have a financial interest in acquiring your property? That stopped me. I had never considered it. I do not know. My house is not special. It is one of the smaller ones in the neighborhood. But it is paid down, correct? You have equity. Yeah, about $120,000 in equity. Marcus wrote something down. Here is what I think is happening. In Arizona, when an HOA forecloses, they can sell the property at auction to recover their costs. Any equity beyond what is owed goes to pay off the mortgage, and sometimes the homeowner gets what is left. But the process is complicated and many homeowners do not understand their rights. If someone wanted to acquire your property cheaply, they could bid at the HOA foreclosure auction. The starting bid is usually just the amount of the debt, which in your case would be $650 plus whatever additional legal fees they tack on. If no one else bids, they get a house with $120,000 in equity for maybe a few $1,000s. My stomach dropped. That is legal. It is a mess, honestly. The law has been challenged multiple times, but yes, technically it is legal if proper procedures are followed. However, if I can prove they manufactured this debt to target you specifically, then we have a case for wrongful foreclosure, fraud, and potentially violations of Arizona's HOA statutes. I would want to file a lawsuit immediately, and get an injunction to stop any foreclosure proceedings. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer for something like this is typically $5,000, but I will tell you what. I am intrigued by this case. If what I suspect is true, there could be significant damages and attorney fees awarded at the end. I will take this on a mixed fee basis. $2,000 retainer now, and if we win, I get a percentage of the recovery plus my fees paid by the other side. If we lose, you are only out the $2,000 and any court costs. It was more money than I wanted to spend, but what choice did I have? Okay, let's do it. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail of my interactions with the HOA. Marcus had me sign a retainer agreement and several other documents. He explained that he would file a lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court alleging wrongful foreclosure attempt, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. He would also file for a temporary restraining order to prevent them from proceeding with any foreclosure while the case was pending. As I was leaving, Marcus said something that stuck with me. Vincent, cases like this often reveal much bigger problems. If they are willing to do this to you, you are probably not the first. Start talking to your neighbors. Find out if anyone else has had issues with Patricia or the board. I drove home feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. I had a lawyer now, which was good, but I was also heading into a legal battle that could drag on for months. That evening, I decided to take Marcus's advice. I walked down to my neighbor's house, a retired couple named George and Linda Martinez who had always been friendly. George answered the door with a smile. Vincent, good to see you. What brings you by? I need to ask you something. Have you ever had any problems with the HOA? With Patricia Whitmore specifically, his smile faded. Why do you ask? I told him about the foreclosure threat. By the time I finished, George was shaking his head. Come inside. Linda needs to hear this. We sat in their living room and George told me their story. 2 years ago, they had received a violation notice for having a decorative fountain in their front yard that was not approved by the architectural committee. They had not known they needed approval because the previous owners had installed it, and it had been there for a decade. Patricia demanded they remove it and pay a $500 fine. They fought it, eventually getting a lawyer involved, and the HOA backed down, but the legal fees cost them $3,000. We won, technically, Linda said, but it felt like losing. And ever since then, Patricia barely speaks to us at meetings. She denied our request to install solar panels last year, even though state law says HOAs cannot ban them. We had to threaten another lawsuit before she approved it. You know anyone else who has had problems? I asked. George thought for a moment. Talked to David Chen on Mesquite Circle. He got into it with Patricia about parking his work van in his driveway. And there is a younger couple, the Johnsons, who got fined for having a garden gnome in their yard. Patricia said it violated the aesthetic standards. I thanked them and spent the next 3 days knocking on doors. What I discovered was disturbing. Out of 43 homes in Pleasant Grove, at least 15 households had stories of excessive fines, arbitrary enforcement, or harassment by Patricia. Most had paid the fines just to make it go away, but a few had fought back. The Johnsons, Tim and Rachel, told me they had paid over $1,000 in fines over 2 years for violations that seemed made up. Their garden gnome fine had escalated when they refused to pay, eventually reaching $800 with late fees before they gave in. David Chen showed me a stack of violation notices he had received over the past year. Parking violations, lawn violations, even a notice claiming his house number was the wrong font. He had documented everything, including dates and times when Patricia had driven by his house taking photos. She is obsessed, David said. I think she gets off on the power, but what can we do? She controls the board. Her friend Margaret Stephenson is the treasurer and always votes with her. The third board member, Robert Finley, is basically a puppet. He never disagrees with Patricia. I took notes on everything and sent it all to Marcus. He called me 2 days later, excitement in his voice. "Vincent, this is bigger than I thought. What you are describing is a pattern of abuse and potential embezzlement. I want to expand our lawsuit to include class action allegations on behalf of other homeowners. But first, I need to do some digging into the HOA's finances. Arizona law allows homeowners to inspect HOA records. I am going to send a formal request for all financial records, meeting minutes, and correspondence for the past 3 years. Will they actually give you that? They have to. If they refuse, we can get a court order. This is going to get interesting." Marcus sent the records request the next day. A week later, I received a call from Patricia herself. Her voice was syrupy sweet, which somehow made it worse. "Vincent, I understand there has been some confusion about your account. I reviewed the records personally, and I am willing to waive the late fees as a courtesy. You would only need to pay the original $50 fine, and we can put this all behind us." I already paid the $50 fine in March. I sent proof to the management company. "Well, our records show differently, but I am trying to work with you here. $50 and we are done. That is more than fair. What about the foreclosure threat? That was just a standard notice. We send those automatically when accounts are in arrears. No need to make a big deal out of it. Just pay the $50. Patricia, I already have an attorney. He has filed a lawsuit. You will be getting served any day now." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. "That is a very unwise decision, Vincent. Legal action will only cost you more money and damage your standing in this community. I suggest you reconsider." "I will see you in court." I hung up. 2 days later, Marcus called with news. They refused to provide the records, flat out refused. Sent me a letter saying the request was overly broad and burdensome. So I filed a motion to compel. The hearing is next week. But here is the interesting part. I did some research on Patricia Whitmore. Her husband, Donald Whitmore, is a real estate investor. He owns several rental properties in the Phoenix area. And get this, in the past 5 years, he has purchased 3 properties at HOA foreclosure auctions in other neighborhoods. My pulse quickened. So this is a pattern, possibly. I cannot prove they have done it in Pleasant Grove yet, but the pieces are fitting together. If I can get access to those financial records, I bet we will find irregularities. Missing payments like yours that coincidentally create debts that lead to foreclosure opportunities. The hearing for the motion to compel was held in a small courtroom at the Maricopa County Courthouse. I sat behind Marcus at the plaintiff's table while Patricia, Margaret, and Robert sat with their attorney, a slick-looking guy named Bradley Morrison from a firm that specialized in HOA representation. The judge, a woman named Sandra Ortiz, listened as both sides made their arguments. Bradley claimed that turning over 3 years of records would be unduly burdensome, and that much of the information was privileged or contained personal information about other homeowners. Marcus countered that Arizona law specifically allowed homeowners to inspect HOA records and that we had a right to this information, especially given the allegations of financial mismanagement and fraud. Judge Ortiz did not take long to decide. The statute is clear. Homeowners have a right to inspect financial records. Mr. Morrison, your clients will produce all requested financial documents, meeting minutes, and correspondence within 30 days. Personal information about homeowners not party to this dispute can be redacted, but the financial records must be complete. Motion granted. Patricia's face turned red as we left the courtroom. Marcus was grinning. Now we wait and see what they have been hiding. 3 weeks later, Marcus called me to his office. He had boxes of documents spread across his conference table. "Vincent, you need to see this. It is worse than I thought." He showed me what he had found. Over the past 3 years, the HOA had collected over $200,000 in fines and fees from homeowners, but only $140,000 had been deposited into the HOA's operating account. $60,000 was missing. The records showed payments being received, but the money never made it to the bank. "Where did it go?" I asked. "That is the question. I have an accountant reviewing everything, but my theory is that someone has been skimming. Probably Patricia, possibly with Margaret's help since she is the treasurer. They would issue fines, collect money, but only deposit some of it. The rest goes into their pockets. Can we prove it? We are working on it. But here is the other thing. Remember how your payment was not in their system? I found 3 other instances in these records where homeowners claimed they paid fines, but the system showed they had not. In 2 of those cases, the homeowners eventually paid again just to avoid foreclosure threats. In the 3rd case, the homeowner moved out of the neighborhood. His house was sold, and guess who purchased it at auction? Donald Whitmore. Bingo. He bought it for $8,000 at an HOA foreclosure sale. The house had a mortgage of about $200,000, which got paid off, but Whitmore bought it subject to the mortgage. He then flipped it 6 months later for $350,000. After paying off the mortgage and closing costs, he probably cleared $100,000 in profit. I felt sick. They are stealing houses. They are stealing houses, Marcus confirmed. And I think yours was supposed to be next. Here is what I want to do. I am going to amend our lawsuit to include allegations of embezzlement and racketeering. I am also going to notify the Arizona Attorney General's office because this may constitute criminal fraud. And I am going to reach out to the other homeowners who have been affected to see if they want to join the lawsuit. What happens to Patricia? If we can prove what I think we can prove, she is going to lose everything. Her position on the board, her reputation, possibly her freedom if criminal charges are filed. And here is the best part. Under Arizona HOA law, if board members are found to have acted fraudulently or in bad faith, they can be held personally liable for damages. That means we can go after her personal assets, including that big fancy house of hers. The next few months were a whirlwind. Marcus amended the lawsuit, and 12 other homeowners joined as plaintiffs. The local news picked up the story and ran a segment about HOA abuse in Arizona. Patricia hired a criminal defense attorney in addition to the HOA's civil attorney. The Arizona Attorney General's office opened an investigation. In the meantime, I had to deal with the stress of it all. Work suffered because I could barely concentrate. I lost 10 pounds from anxiety. But every time I wanted to give up, I thought about all the other homeowners Patricia had victimized, and it kept me going. The breakthrough came when Marcus's accountant found evidence that Margaret had been writing checks to a shell company called Desert Consulting Services. The company was registered to Donald Whitmore. Over 3 years, Desert Consulting Services had been paid $80,000 for management consulting by the HOA, but there was no evidence any consulting services had actually been provided. "This is money laundering," Marcus said. They were funneling HOA funds to Donald through a fake company. Combined with the missing fine payments, we are talking about serious fraud. The criminal investigation moved faster than the civil lawsuit. 2 investigators from the Attorney General's office interviewed me, Marcus, and several other homeowners. They subpoenaed bank records for Patricia, Margaret, and Donald. They executed a search warrant at Patricia's house and seized computers and financial documents. I was not there when they arrested Patricia, but David Chen was driving by and saw it happen. He called me immediately. "Vincent, you are not going to believe this. The cops just led Patricia out of her house in handcuffs. Margaret, too. They are taking them away right now." I felt a surge of vindication mixed with surreal disbelief. This was really happening. The local news covered the arrests extensively. Patricia Whitmore and Margaret Stephenson were charged with theft, fraud, and racketeering. Donald Whitmore was charged as an accomplice. The coverage painted a picture of a years-long scheme to defraud homeowners and steal properties. Our neighborhood became infamous as an example of HOA corruption. With Patricia and Margaret arrested, the HOA board fell apart. Robert Finley resigned immediately, claiming he had no knowledge of any wrongdoing. The remaining homeowners held an emergency meeting and elected a new interim board. One of the first things they did was drop all outstanding fines and violations, including the foreclosure threat against me. But Marcus was not done. "We are still pursuing the civil case. I want to make sure you and everyone else gets compensated for what you went through, and I want to send a message that this kind of behavior has consequences." The civil trial was scheduled for 8 months after the arrests. In the meantime, Patricia and Margaret both took plea deals in the criminal case. Patricia pled guilty to theft and fraud charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $150,000. Margaret got 2 years and had to pay $50,000 in restitution. Donald Whitmore pled guilty to money laundering and got probation plus a large fine. By the time our civil trial started, the outcome felt inevitable. Marcus had mountains of evidence. The criminal convictions made it nearly impossible for the defense to argue there had been no wrongdoing. The trial lasted only 4 days. Marcus put me on the stand first. I told my story about the $50 fine, the foreclosure threat, and the stress it had caused. I talked about feeling violated in my own home, about the anxiety of wondering if I would lose everything over a payment I had actually made. Other homeowners testified about their experiences. George Martinez talked about the fountain fine. David Chen described the constant harassment. Tim Johnson broke down in tears describing how he and his wife had almost divorced over the financial stress of Patricia's endless fines. Marcus put his accountant on the stand to explain the financial irregularities. He showed how money had been systematically stolen and how the scheme had been designed to target vulnerable homeowners. The defense tried to argue that Patricia had acted in what she believed was the best interest of the HOA, that any financial irregularities were mistakes, not intentional fraud. But it rang hollow given the criminal convictions. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Patricia, Margaret, and the HOA liable for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They awarded compensatory damages totaling $400,000 to be split among the plaintiffs. But the real shock came with the punitive damages. The jury foreman read the verdict. "We, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $2 million to be paid by Patricia Whitmore personally." The courtroom erupted. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. I felt tears in my eyes, but Marcus was not finished. He stood up. "Your Honor, I have an additional motion." Under Arizona HOA law, when board members are found to have committed fraud, their personal assets can be seized to satisfy judgments. Patricia Whitmore's primary asset is her residence at the end of Seguero Lane, valued at approximately $1.8 million. I am asking the court to order that property be transferred to my clients to satisfy the judgment. Patricia's attorney objected vigorously, but Judge Ortiz reviewed the statute and the case law Marcus cited. After a brief recess, she returned with her ruling. The law is clear. When an HOA board member commits fraud in their official capacity, they can be held personally liable and their assets can be seized. Miss Whitmore's residence is not protected by homestead exemptions in this case because the fraud was committed through her role as HOA president. I am ordering the property located at the end of Saguaro Lane to be transferred to the plaintiff class to satisfy the judgment. The plaintiffs can decide how to dispose of the property, whether through sale or other means. I could barely process what had just happened. We had won. Not just one, but one big. Patricia was going to lose her house. The HOA president's house was now ours. The aftermath took months to sort out. The 13 plaintiff households decided to sell Patricia's house and split the proceeds. It sold for $1.7 million. After legal fees and costs, each household received about $90,000. For me, that money meant financial security I had never had before. I paid off my mortgage, put money in savings, and finally felt like I could breathe. Patricia's house stood empty for weeks before the sale closed. I drove by it sometimes, looking at the place that had represented everything wrong with our HOA. It felt surreal that we now owned it, that her abuse of power had cost her everything. The new HOA board implemented massive reforms. They hired a reputable management company with proper oversight. They eliminated most of the petty rules that had made life miserable. They established a process for disputing fines and violations. Pleasant Grove became a normal neighborhood again, not a dictatorship run by a power-hungry tyrant. I ran into Robert Finley at the grocery store about a year after everything ended. He looked older, more worn down. He approached me cautiously. "Vincent, I just want you to know I had no idea what Patricia was doing. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked questions. I am sorry." I studied his face and saw genuine remorse. "I believe you, but you were complicit through your silence. When you see something wrong, you have to speak up." He nodded. "I have learned that lesson. I will never serve on another HOA board. I cannot live with that kind of responsibility." Marcus and I stayed in touch. He used our case as the centerpiece of his practice, representing homeowners against abusive HOAs across Arizona. He told me that inquiries from potential clients tripled after our case made the news. He was making a real difference, fighting against the kind of petty tyranny that had nearly destroyed my life. David Chen and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We started having regular barbecues, inviting other neighbors who had been victims of Patricia's reign. We built a real community, the kind of community an HOA is supposed to foster but rarely does. One evening, about 18 months after the verdict, I was sitting on my back patio watching the sunset when my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Vincent, I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia was released on parole today. She served about 20 months of her sentence. I do not think she will be a problem, but I wanted you to know." I thanked him for the information and hung up. Part of me felt anxious at the thought of Patricia being free again, but mostly I felt pity. She had lost everything because of her greed and need for control. Her house, her freedom, her reputation, all gone. A few weeks later, I saw her. I was at a gas station in Scottsdale, filling up my car, when I noticed a woman at the pump across from me. She looked thinner, older, her blonde hair now streaked with gray. But it was definitely Patricia. She was driving an old Honda Civic, a far cry from the Mercedes she used to drive. Our eyes met for a moment. I saw recognition in hers, followed by shame. She looked away quickly and finished pumping her gas. I watched her drive away and felt an unexpected sense of closure. The monster who had terrorized our neighborhood was just a broken, middle-aged woman now, dealing with the consequences of her actions. Justice had been served. Life in Pleasant Grove continued peacefully. The new HOA board was functional and fair. Fines were rare and reasonable. People actually enjoyed living there again. I started dating someone I met at a work conference, a woman named Penelope Kennedy who was a graphic designer. She thought the whole HOA saga was simultaneously horrifying and darkly hilarious. We bonded over our shared skepticism of authority and our love of British mystery shows. When I told Penelope the full story one evening over dinner at my place, she shook her head in amazement. "So you are telling me you fought the HOA over a $50 fine and ended up winning the president's house?" Basically. Though it was more about the principle than the money. They were trying to steal my home. It is like something out of a movie. Except in the movie, there would have been more explosions. I laughed. I could have done without the stress, but yeah, it worked out. The best part is knowing Patricia cannot hurt anyone else. That neighborhood is safe from her now. Penelope reached across the table and took my hand. "You did a good thing, Vincent. You stood up when a lot of people would have just rolled over. You should be proud." I thought about that. Proud. I had never really considered it that way. The whole experience had felt like survival, like fighting for my basic right to exist in my own home. But she was right. I had stood up. I had fought back. And I had won. The legal bills had been substantial, even with Marcus's mixed fee arrangement. But the $90,000 settlement covered all of it and left me with a nice cushion. More importantly, the experience changed how I viewed the world. I became an advocate for HOA reform in Arizona. I spoke at city council meetings about the need for better oversight of homeowner associations. I wrote articles for local newspapers about the dangers of unchecked HOA power. A state legislator reached out to me and asked me to testify before a committee considering HOA reform legislation. I told my story to a room full of politicians and advocates. Some of them had tears in their eyes by the time I finished. The bill eventually passed, creating new protections for homeowners and new penalties for HOA board members who abused their power. It was not a complete fix, but it was a start. 2 years after the verdict, I stood in my backyard during our annual neighborhood barbecue. David was manning the grill, cooking burgers and hot dogs. George and Linda were telling stories about their recent trip to San Diego. Tim and Rachel Johnson were playing with their kids on the lawn. Penelope was chatting with some of the other neighbors, fitting in perfectly. I looked around at the community we had built and felt genuinely happy. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be. People looking out for each other, supporting each other, without fear of arbitrary punishment or petty tyranny. Marcus showed up late, carrying a case of beer and apologizing for his tardiness. He had been in court all day on another HOA case. We stood together near the grill, drinking cold beers in the Arizona heat. "How is the new case going?" I asked. "Good. Similar situation to yours, actually. HOA president on a power trip, trumped up fines, threats of foreclosure, but we have precedent now. Your case is being cited in courtrooms across the state. I am glad something good came out of it all." "Are you kidding? You changed the game, Vincent. HOAs in Arizona are terrified now. They know they cannot get away with this crap anymore. That is because of you." We clinked our beer bottles together. I thought about the journey from that moment in my driveway when I first read the foreclosure letter to now, standing in my backyard surrounded by friends and community. It had been terrifying and exhausting and infuriating, but it had also been worth it. A year later, I received a letter in the mail from the Arizona Attorney General's office. It informed me that Patricia Whitmore had been ordered to pay additional restitution to homeowners beyond our neighborhood who had been affected by her schemes. The investigation had uncovered victims in 3 other communities where Donald had been involved in similar foreclosure purchases. The total amount of restitution ordered was over $600,000. I called Marcus immediately. "Did you see this? They found more victims." I did, and here is the interesting part. Several of those victims are filing their own civil suits now, using our case as a template. Patricia is going to be dealing with legal consequences for years. Good. She should. That evening, I sat down with Penelope and told her about the letter. We had been dating for over a year now, and she had moved in a few months earlier. She knew the whole story, but was always interested in updates. "You ever feel bad for her?" Penelope asked. "I know she did terrible things, but losing everything like that has to be devastating." I considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I feel bad in an abstract way, like I would feel bad for any human being who destroyed their own life. But then, I remember what she did. She was not just enforcing rules. She was deliberately targeting vulnerable people and trying to steal their homes for profit. She hurt a lot of people." "So no, I do not really feel bad for her," Penelope nodded. "That is fair. I probably would not either if I had gone through what you did." We spent the rest of the evening watching a movie and eating popcorn, enjoying the simple pleasure of a quiet night at home. My home. The home that Patricia had tried to take from me and failed. 3 years after the verdict, David Chen called me with unexpected news. "Vincent, you are not going to believe this. Someone bought the house that used to be Patricia's. They are moving in next week." "Did you find out who?" "A young family. The husband is a doctor, the wife is a teacher. They have 2 little kids. They seem nice. I talked to them when they were looking at the house. They knew about its history, but they said they got a good deal and they are not superstitious." I laughed. "Good for them. That house deserves a fresh start with decent people." When the new family moved in, several of us went over to introduce ourselves and welcome them. The husband, whose name was Aaron, was friendly and appreciative. The wife, Jessica, seemed a bit overwhelmed by all the attention but grateful. Their kids, a boy and a girl maybe 4 and 6 years old, ran around the empty house excitedly. "We love the neighborhood," Jessica said. "Everyone has been so welcoming. We heard there was some trouble with the old HOA board, but the new board seems great." "It is a good neighborhood now," I said. "We went through a rough period, but we came out stronger. You picked a good place to raise your family." As I walked home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed. The house that had symbolized tyranny and abuse was now home to a young family starting their lives together. Patricia was somewhere dealing with the consequences of her actions. The neighborhood was thriving, and I was happy. Marcus called me occasionally with updates on other HOA cases he was handling. He had become something of a celebrity in the Arizona legal community, known as the lawyer who took down corrupt HOA boards. He told me stories of board members backing down the moment they heard he was representing the homeowner. Our case had created real change. 4 years after everything started with that certified letter in my driveway, I proposed to Penelope. We were hiking in the desert near Phoenix, watching the sunset paint the rocks orange and red. When I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, she said yes immediately. We got married in our backyard in Pleasant Grove, surrounded by neighbors who had become family. David was my best man. Marcus gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying. George and Linda brought enough food to feed an army. Aaron and Jessica from the former Whitmore house came with their kids, who served as adorable if chaotic ring bearers. During the reception, I stood with Penelope, looking out at all the people gathered in our yard. You know, if someone had told me 4 years ago when I got that foreclosure letter that it would eventually lead to all this, I would have thought they were crazy. Penelope kissed me. Life is weird like that. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. You fought for what was right and you won. That is not nothing. I just wanted to keep my house. And you did. But you also helped a lot of other people keep theirs. You changed laws, you made a difference. That is pretty incredible, Vincent. I pulled her close and thought about the journey. The fear, the anger, the stress of the legal battle, the satisfaction of the verdict, the shock of winning Patricia's house, the relief of finally being safe in my own home. And now this, a wedding surrounded by community and love. Marcus found me later in the evening, pleasantly drunk and nostalgic. Vincent, my friend, I want you to know something. In 25 years of practicing law, your case is the one I am most proud of. We took on a bully and we destroyed her. We protected people who could not protect themselves. That is why I became a lawyer. I could not have done it without you, Marcus. You saved my house. We saved each other. You had the courage to fight. I just provided the legal framework. But together, we did something important. We hugged, two men who had gone through battle together and come out victorious. Life continued in Pleasant Grove. The HOA board remained responsible and fair. Property values went up as word spread that the neighborhood was under new, sane management. I heard through the grapevine that Patricia had moved to Tucson, working as a receptionist at a dental office. Margaret had left Arizona entirely, relocating to Nevada. Donald had declared bankruptcy after paying all the restitution and fines. 5 years after the verdict, Penelope and I had our first child, a daughter we named Victoria. Holding her in the hospital, I thought about the world I wanted her to grow up in. A world where people stood up against injustice. A world where bullies faced consequences. A world where a middle-class guy like me could fight back against corrupt authority and win. We brought Victoria home to the house on Cactus Drive, the house I had almost lost, the house I had fought so hard to keep. I carried her through the front door and showed her the nursery we had prepared. Penelope stood beside me, both of us exhausted and elated. She is going to love growing up here, Penelope said. This is a good neighborhood now. A safe neighborhood. Yeah, I agreed. It is. I thought about Patricia sometimes, usually when I saw a news story about HOA abuse somewhere else in the country. I wondered if she ever thought about what she had done, if she had any regrets. I hoped she did. I hoped she understood the pain she had caused and had found some kind of redemption. But mostly, I just stopped thinking about her. She was not worth the mental energy. David's kids and Victoria became best friends as they grew up. They played in yards that had once been battlegrounds in a war against petty tyranny. They did not know that history. To them, it was just home, safe and normal. I continued my advocacy work for HOA reform when I could, fitting it around my job and family responsibilities. I spoke at community meetings, wrote op-eds, and consulted with homeowners facing similar situations to what I had experienced. Some cases settled quickly once the HOA realized the homeowner had representation and knew their rights. Others went to court, and we won more often than we lost. Marcus retired after another 10 years, having built a substantial reputation and a comfortable nest egg. At his retirement party, he told stories about various cases, but he kept coming back to mine. The Whitmore case, he said, raising a glass of whiskey, taught me that justice is not just about legal theory or clever arguments. It is about standing up for regular people against those who abuse power. Vincent Drake could have walked away. He could have paid the inflated fine just to avoid hassle. But he did not. He fought. And because he fought, Dozens of other homeowners got justice too. That is what the law is supposed to do. Everyone at the party applauded. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride. As Victoria grew older, she asked me about the story. She had heard bits and pieces from neighbors and had questions. I told her an age-appropriate version, explaining that sometimes people in charge make bad decisions and hurt others, and when that happens, good people have to stand up and say no. "Were you scared, Daddy?" she asked. "Very scared," I admitted. "I was afraid I would lose our house. I was afraid I would lose everything, but I knew what they were doing was wrong and I had to fight back. And you won. I won. We won. A lot of people helped, but yes, in the end we won." She hugged me tightly. "I am glad you did not give up." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." Years passed. Pleasant Grove remained a peaceful, well-managed community. The HOA operated transparently, with regular meetings and reasonable rules. Fines were rare and proportional. No one lived in fear of arbitrary enforcement or vindictive board members. It was, in short, what an HOA should be. I sometimes drove past the house at the end of Sagaro Lane, where Patricia had once lived in her mansion and ruled the neighborhood like a fiefdom. Aaron and Jessica had made it a real home, full of love and laughter. Their kids played basketball in the driveway. They hosted neighborhood barbecues. The house had good energy now. One day, nearly a decade after the verdict, I received a letter. It had no return address, just a Phoenix postmark. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Vincent, you do not know me, but I was one of the homeowners in the Copper Ridge subdivision who was affected by Patricia Whitmore's schemes. My family nearly lost our home to foreclosure over manufactured violations. When we heard about your case and how you fought back, it gave us hope. We hired an attorney and we fought too. We won. We kept our home. I just wanted to thank you for showing us that it was possible to stand up to these people. You changed our lives. Thank you." Signed, a grateful homeowner. I showed the letter to Penelope that evening. She read it and smiled. "See, you made a difference. You made a real, tangible difference in people's lives." I kept that letter in my desk drawer, pulling it out occasionally when I needed a reminder of why the fight had been worth it. Because it was not just about me. It was about everyone who had been victimized by Patricia and people like her. It was about saying that ordinary people have power, that we do not have to accept abuse from petty tyrants, that justice is possible. The HOA story became a part of my identity, something I was known for in the community and beyond. When I introduced myself at professional events or social gatherings, someone would inevitably say, "Wait, are you the guy who won the HOA case? I read about that." And I would tell the story again, each time remembering how it felt to receive that foreclosure letter, how terrified I had been, and how sweet victory had tasted. As Victoria approached her teenage years, she developed an interest in law and justice. She participated in mock trial at school and talked about maybe becoming an attorney someday. I introduced her to Marcus, who was enjoying retirement but still loved talking about the law. He told her stories about cases he had worked on, emphasizing the importance of using legal knowledge to help people who could not help themselves. "Your dad is one of the bravest clients I ever had," Marcus told her. "A lot of people would have given up. The system is intimidating, expensive, and exhausting, but he kept going because he knew what was right. That is the kind of person you want to be, Victoria, someone who stands up even when it is hard." Pleasant Grove continued to thrive. The neighborhood became known as a model for how HOAs should operate. Researchers from Arizona State University even did a case study on the transformation of the community, from a place dominated by an authoritarian board to a healthy, democratic neighborhood association. I was interviewed for the study, as were several other homeowners and Marcus. The case study was published in a journal about property law and management. The authors concluded that strong legal protections for homeowners, combined with transparency and accountability in HOA governance, were essential to preventing abuse. They cited our lawsuit as a turning point in Arizona HOA law, creating precedents that protected homeowners across the state. I never made any money from the publicity or the case study. That was not the point. The point was that what had happened to me would hopefully happen to fewer people in the future. The point was that Patricia Whitmore and people like her would think twice before abusing their power. The point was that ordinary people like me could fight back and win. Penelope and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary with a party in our backyard, the same spot where we had gotten married. Many of the same people attended, older now but still the core community that had formed during and after the HOA battle. David made a toast. 10 years ago, this neighborhood was a very different place. We lived in fear of fines, of violations, of losing our homes over nonsense. Vincent Drake changed that. He stood up when it would have been easier to back down. He fought when it would have been cheaper to pay. And because of him, we all live better lives. So here is to Vincent and Penelope, and here is to standing up for what is right. Everyone cheered and drank. I felt a wave of gratitude for these people, this community, this life that had emerged from the ashes of that terrible conflict with Patricia. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Victoria was asleep, Penelope and I sat on our back patio looking at the stars. The Arizona sky was clear and brilliant, full of possibilities. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had just paid the $650? Penelope asked. I thought about it. Sometimes. Life would have been easier in the short term. But I would have always known I let them bully me, and Patricia would have moved on to the next victim. So no, I do not regret fighting, even though it was hell at the time. I am proud of you, you know, not just for winning, but for having the courage to fight in the first place. A lot of people do not have that. I do not know if it was courage or stubbornness, maybe both, she laughed. Probably both, but it worked out. Yeah, it really did. We sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, thinking about the journey that had led us here. From a $50 fine to a multi-million-dollar verdict. From a foreclosure threat to winning the HOA president's house. From fear and anger to peace and community. It had been a long, strange trip, but I would not change any of it, because in the end, I had not just kept my house. I had helped protect an entire community. I had changed laws that would help countless other homeowners. I had stood up to a bully and won, and that victory was not just mine. It belonged to everyone who had been hurt by Patricia, everyone who had been too afraid to fight, everyone who needed to know that justice was possible. The house on Cactus Drive stood solid and secure, a symbol of everything I had fought for. My family slept safely inside. My neighbors lived without fear. Pleasant Grove was truly pleasant now, a community built on mutual respect rather than authoritarian control. And somewhere in Arizona, Patricia Whitmore was living with the consequences of her actions, her mansion gone, her power stripped away, her legacy one of greed and corruption. I did not take pleasure in her downfall, but I did not regret it either. She had made her choices. She had hurt people deliberately and systematically. She had gotten what she deserved. As for me, I got what I deserved too. A home, a family, a community, justice, and the knowledge that when it mattered most, I had stood up and fought back. That $50 fine had cost Patricia everything and given me more than I ever imagined. Not in money, though the settlement had been substantial, but in dignity, in community, in the satisfaction of knowing I had made a real difference. I never saw Patricia again after that day at the gas station. I heard she eventually moved out of state entirely, trying to start over somewhere no one knew her history. I hoped she found some kind of peace, but mostly I just stopped thinking about her. She was not part of my life anymore, not even as a memory that caused pain. She was just a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when power corrupts and people forget that they are supposed to serve, not rule. Pleasant Grove went on, year after year, a thriving community where people actually wanted to live. The HOA operated efficiently and fairly, maintaining property values and community standards without terrorizing residents. It was proof that the system could work when good people were in charge, and when there were consequences for those who abused their authority. And every time I pulled into my driveway, parking in front of the house that Patricia had tried to take from me, I felt a quiet sense of victory. I had fought for what was mine, for what was right, and I had won. The lawyer had indeed won me the president's house, sold it, and given me justice beyond what I had imagined possible. And that $50 fine, it ended up being the most expensive mistake Patricia Whitmore ever made.